We are back again, another episode brought to you by Hez Boxing Equipment. We're going to look back on the weekend at the PFL because we didn't record last week. We are going to look back on the UFC in Macau with the UK interest on there and Cage Warriors 181 in Newcastle. Then later on, we will discuss UFC 310, the interest that we have on there, and there's big implications in a few fights on that. And then we'll look ahead to the first quarter of next year. But firstly, how are we doing, Nathan?
I'm doing good. There's been a lot of fights in the last couple of weeks. Like the UFC Macau card, obviously the PFL happening, albeit not in front of a whole lot of people, but some great fights on there. And I suppose there's nothing better to start with than the PFL card. I mean, we'll start with the positive before we get into the negative result, and which was Dakota Ditcheva with just an unbelievable performance and really announcing herself on there against Talia Santos. And that's not an easy fight at all. And she made it look like easy work.
Yeah, she made it look really, really easy. The nickname, Dangerous. She's living up to it. She's still getting stick for quality of opponents. But Talia Santos, like you said, she's a solid name. UFC, good UFC name. She's been around for years, a solid Brazilian. And Dakota just made it look really, really easy. Was Santos past the best? Yeah, probably. That's why she's ultimately in the PFL. But it doesn't matter. Dakota entered that tournament, which is 4 fights in 8 months, so it's brutal on your body, and you can only beat what's put in front of you. And she's absolutely destroyed everyone throughout the tournament and walked away with £1 million. So who's the one that's laughing? Those people that are sat trolling her on Instagram and Twitter, etc., or Dakota that's walked away with £1 million in the bank and not a scratch on her.
That's it. And I don't know particularly how the PFL, but that's like works in terms of splitting that money. But that's an awful lot of money, and it almost feels like, you probably could just stay there and do the Kayla Harrison and just for a couple of years just keep going. If she's making easy work of Santos, who gave Shevchenko one of her toughest fights before she lost, and was coming off 3 wins herself, obviously, to get to the final. You think like surely this is like the place to be at the minute for Ditcheva in terms of. And also, it gives PFL. I know that they're probably going to do a lot of stuff in Saudi because that's where the money is. But in terms of if they do want to look towards the UK and that's they've got not just one name, but now they have 2 big names now who have got to finals and won championships. They can build around and say, look, well, come watch us. We've got Brendan Loughnane and we've got Dakota Ditcheva. Come watch our shows.
Absolutely. I think for Dakota, she's got options now. She's still really, really young. I think she's 23 or 24. I think you mentioned the Harrison fight. I think that's a highly likely possible next. Or I'd like to see her move up in weight at some point as well, go up to bantamweight, because she's massive for a flyweight. She's huge. She's got like the build of like an Anderson Silva kind of all rangy and stuff. She's great. She's great to watch. So yeah, I think she's got options, and the structure of the PFL. I think it's worked for the likes of Brendan. He's been in PFL for a long time now, while they've been growing as a brand. But for Dakota now, it is a brand, the PFL. It's more globally aware. They're signing more superstars. Like you said, they've got the Saudi aspect. So why go anywhere else? If you're in Dakota's position, why go anywhere else? I know, like I said about the trolls and these people saying this and that, should be in the UFC. And maybe I probably think that I'd like to see her in the UFC at some point, but like I said, from Dakota's position, she doesn't need to go anywhere else at the moment. But mentioning Brendan, the other Mancunian that was also top of the bill, he just come up against a very, very strong Russian that you'd think that was going to be on the ground for the full fight, but it wasn't. It had a bit of everything. He was ultimately just too strong for Brendan, but Brendan's been in the game for a long time. That was his 3rd run in the championships. What's next for him? I'd like to see him come back to I think the PFL might look to do Manchester. They've done Newcastle and a few other places over here. Dakota has called for the Manchester thing. And Brendan, top of the bill. They've also got Lewis McGrillen from Manchester, who's in the European Championships next weekend. So maybe he could be on a Manchester card. I think that's a possibility for Brendan. The rest of the card, 6 title fights in all. And we'll just touch on the slightly negative that it was in an empty arena because it was dominated by Europeans and Russian fighters, weren't it, Nath? So was it the wrong choice of venue? Albeit, I think the Saudis was putting their money in. It was a part of Riyadh season.
It's tough, isn't it? I suppose because the one issue is there's a lot of Russian fighters, and the easiest place for them to go fight, as you see in the UFC, is Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, those sort of Middle Eastern venues. So I think they'd probably have had issues with, in terms of if it was in the UK, getting into the country. It's not always easy to get. So I think it probably, when you consider the bulk of their audience, like, and fighters, but when you consider their audience, it's probably the wrong place. But I don't really know how you combat that if you're Saudi or you're the person running this. It's a really tricky one for them, because they've got to figure out a way to, obviously, I don't doubt money is an issue, but surely you want your product to look like people are watching it. And unfortunately, I don't think many people in Saudi, could be wrong, but they don't particularly care for that fight. For like PFL, they want to see the biggest names and the biggest stars, and for no fault of their own, PFL just don't have that. So it's a slight issue that they're going to have. But if to be fair, as long as the fighters are still getting paid, and who cares too much, I guess, and there's still the $1 million available. At the end of the day, that's what's important, rather than, unfortunately, the fact it's going to be in Saudi, and that's what makes it happen. And so it's a bit of a tough one for them, especially if they're a Russian-dominated sort of promotion. It's, unfortunately, there is the best place to do it, because you can't really do the fights in Russia.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to find like a middle ground somewhere in Europe that's not the UK. Like you said, they have trouble getting in. And you're right about when it's in Saudi. I think they only care really about the superstars. It's like with the boxing. There was a unification cruiserweight world title fight the other week, Zerdo Ramirez versus Chris Billam-Smith, and that was an empty arena. But when we've seen Usyk and Fury and those big bill cards, packed arenas, the atmosphere is growing there. But it's just a bit of a tough one. But the fight's delivered, and the MENA card, before they name it, that was all the local fighters, Saudi fighters, and from their neck of the woods. And the fight's delivered. They all did deliver. The only negative, as well, we call it a negative, it was just an empty arena. But I'm sure in time they'll be able to find a solution for that. Because it's just a shame that it was 6 title fights and it was the PFL Championships, an empty arena, but it is what it is. And the week before, moving on to the week before quickly, Cage Warriors 181 in Newcastle. Now, that wasn't an empty arena, Virtue Motors Arena. That's where Newcastle Eagles, the basketball team, played. It was a sellout, I think. Harry Hardwick looked spectacular, retained his featherweight title, and Kennedy Freeman became just the 4th women's champion in Cage Warriors history. Sean Clancy Jr. was my standout on the night. Scottish, he looked absolutely fantastic. And we also had UFC Macau that weekend, China. Now, speaking of crowds, we're going to stay on that. What a crowd that was. Now, they've not been there for a few years, since before COVID, obviously. And it delivered, didn't it, Nathan? From top to bottom, the card delivered.
Yeah, it was some really good fights in there. Some, from the sort of lesser herd of fighters, there was some incredible knockouts. With the doctor, I think it's Ming Shi, that incredible, her family might find out now about her MMA career. I mean, the main event was fantastic in terms of PT Yan and Figueiredo. It delivered in terms of a really high quality fight, not just that, but entertaining as well. And PT Yan getting a really, really important win for him, and just showing that he's still one of the top guys and one of the best technical fighters in the UFC, and staking that claim to get back in that bantamweight. And I think the most impressive thing with Yan is, a lot of the times in his fights, they're always close, because takes a while to get going. Whereas this one, he got going early, and that made the difference, because it went 25, and he probably won every round, and it was still a close fight, and he ended up winning, because he got out early and just sort of said, right, I'm going to win this first round. Then the rest was history in terms of that, because we've seen before he started slow against Sterling and he lost that fight because of that. But now, if he can sort of start quick now, and that's when he can now establish himself as one of the top contenders in the bantamweight division.
I think, like you said, I think the starting quick helped him. He won every round, didn't he? It was close fight, but he won every round. He's still well and truly in the mix. It was a great main event, and without it being 2 major worldwide global names as well, it still brought out the massive crowd in the Chinese, which we like to see. But the British boys, Lonnie Carver, I think you did his last ever Cage Warriors interview before he went to UFC, which is pretty cool. It wasn't he reckons it wasn't his best performance, but he did what he had to do to get the win. There wasn't a spectacular knockout as he had previously, which obviously everybody's always expecting. Once you've delivered something like that, everyone expects that again. But yeah, what a boy! What a boy! Would you think he can be a problem for the flyweights in the future?
I think so. Yeah.
You've seen him live as well.
Yeah, he's definitely
a great fight with it was the fight with Sean De Silva. They both beaten at the time. It was a cracking fight as well. That
I think. Look, Brendan Loughnane, what I'm saying. Lonnie Kavanagh is very, very young still, and he's very entertaining, which is going to suit him well in the UFC. Obviously, they live for that sort of stuff, and he's technically very proficient. He's really good. I think as long as they slow build him and they don't rush him into giving him, ranked fights. I mean, we'll get on to someone perhaps being slightly rushed or at least getting a really great opportunity in their first fight. He's someone that probably they need to just take their time with and just let him keep fighting guys like Ochoa and then eventually build him up to you're just outside the rankings. And then, because he's good enough, he's good enough and he'll develop quick enough that he can keep those steps in, but you don't want to just throw him in against, I can't think of a name off the top, but throw him in against a ranked guy and it just being a step too soon. So as long as they take their time, you do have a really great prospect that also delivers fun fights, which again is like the UFC mantra nowadays. So I think it's a really bright future for him, and obviously someone that can appeal on these sort of cards as well as the UK cards. So you've got that double-edged, in terms of drawing power, if he carries on that development. So yeah, I think there's a lot of future, and there's a lot you can have a lot of stock in Kavanagh, and then expect to be delivered on it.
Absolutely. The matchmaking from Cage Warriors was brilliant. His last fight, Sean De Silva, I think he was unbeaten or 6-1 or something like that. Then he's done it on the Contender Series, and then he fought Ochoa, and I'm sure he was unbeaten going in 7-0. So if they keep matching him like that, slowly, gradually, against the opponents that are at the same stage of the career as he is, and then he can go on and progress from there and work his way towards the top 15, and maybe we can get another UK superstar like we're seeing the emergence of Owen Elliott, and the other UK representative, Kerry Sota. He got all the way through on the road to ONE FC, and he was just brutally knocked out. It just wasn't his night, but you just have to take some time out when you get brutally knocked out like that, because it can have an effect on your card. So wish him all the best, and I hope he comes back stronger. And now we will look ahead to UFC 310 this week, and we'll start with the UK Irish interest, which would have been a double title fight card, this, wouldn't it, if it wasn't for Bilal pulling out against Shavkat Rakmanov. And now we have Ian Garry, who was scheduled to fight. He was scheduled to fight Buckler, weren't it?
Okay, yeah.
That's right. And now because Bilal pulled out injury, now he's fighting Shavkat. It's not for an interim title, because Bilal's not out for that long, according to the top brass. But was that who you was referring to in terms of maybe an opportunity too soon?
No, I was referring to Asaraka, but the
okay.
Ian Garry, this is a fantastic opportunity as well. And I'm not saying Asaraka don't deserve it when we get onto that, but Ian Garry's got a really good opportunity here, because obviously it's a big step up in terms of opponent. And he's up against, probably one of the best fighters in the UFC, just, an uncrowned king, so to speak. But if Ian Garry wins, this is a chance to go, to that next level and really establish himself. Because there's been, Gary's won all his fights and he's done well, but there's that people don't seem to have taken to him as probably much as he'd have expected. But if he wins this, then, people have got to start respecting him and understand that this guy really is the next thing. And obviously you've got someone that is marketable and controversial and can headline arenas and do all this stuff. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, if it goes 25, Ian Garry's got that advantage. He's done it before. Shavkat has never done that. He's never gone to a decision in his life, which probably tells you how this fight might go. But yeah, I mean, I can't look past Rakmanov, but wow, what an opportunity for Garry. And, if it's meant to be for him at this point, then he's gonna take it with both hands and hope, get his hand raised. If not, it's not the worst loss to have on your record against Shavkat Rakmanov. So I actually, obviously you can get like knocked out and stuff like that, but I think it's almost as close to a win-win as you can get in this sort of sport.
Yeah, it's definitely a win-win. Even if he loses, he's still going to be in the mix no matter what, because we don't know what's going to happen with Leo. We don't know the outcome of Leon's next fight yet. But last time when he fought MVP, I thought he did what he had to do to win the fight. But can he do that against someone of Shavkat's ilk? Like you said, he's never been to a decision, so that tells you all you need to know. And I'm with you. I can't see past it. He's one of my favourite fighters at the minute. He's exciting. He's exciting to watch. When there's a Shavkat fight on, you know you can't miss it. When there's an Ian Garry fight on, you can take it or leave it. You know what I mean? But he does have that pull, because for one, he's Irish, and for two, he's Marmite. Some people like him, some people dislike him, but you can't deny his ability. He might not have that likability, but he does have that technical ability, and if he can get the job done on Saturday night, nobody can deny him. Tough ass, but then you can't deny him. And in terms of beating him, he's going to beat the number one contender. So then, by rights, Ian Garry would be next in line for the title shot. So Garry versus Bilal. We all know how that fight would play out. It'd be on the ground for 25 minutes. Then if Garry was to beat Bilal and Leon was to win in March, then that would possibly align Ian Garry and Leon Edwards for the championship in a massive fight in the UK. And Leon also said on his own broadcast the other night, on the boxing broadcast, that he's headline for the March card. I thought it would have been Padder, but he's headline, opponent TBA. So yeah, it's a lot of implications, that fight, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, it'll be interesting to see who Leon's going to fight come that time in March. It's tough with the, nowadays it's tough to see if it's going to be one of these guys, because it's, that will they do a fight in 4 months' time? Probably not. But yeah, Shavkat is just, this is the number one contenders fight. It's fair play to Shavkat as well for taking it. I mean, he's not done look like the sort of character that's going to duck out the way, but obviously had a title fight ready made for him, and he's chosen to take this one on just to, stay on the card and keep building his reputation. So, fair play to him, because you don't have to do that, I imagine. And yeah, so it will be interesting. There's a lot on this, and if Ian Garry, the best result for Ian Garry if he doesn't win is to show a lot of heart and show a lot of fight, and which he's very capable of. I'd say he's been decision an awful lot, so he's got the gas tank for it. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll move on to the main event. It's a debut title shot for Kai Asaraka against Alexandre Pantoja. I mean, this is high level. Do you think Asaraka is going to be a real test for Pantoja, or do you think Pantoja retains?
He's destroyed everyone in Japan on Rising. He's a two-time champion. Is it the level of opposition as the UFC and Pantoja? I'm not too sure. Pantoja's 34 and he's beaten pretty much everybody who is he's beaten everybody of the highest caliber level that he's been asked to beat. But he looks like a superstar, this Asaraka. And he comes with a big reputation. And how many times have we seen it before, Nathan, where a fighter's coming in, he's fought for the title straight away, just purely based off reputation?
I'm not sure. I can't think of many people. I mean, Pereira got jumped to it, but it's not like he had to still have his early fights, didn't he? And
yeah.
I can't. Maybe back in the day, probably back in the day happened an awful lot. But in terms of modern times, can't think of anyone off the top.
Back in the day, it was more. I think it might have been needed more for promotional purposes, but the UFC is not in a position where it necessarily needs to do that now. I mean, because it's not exactly being shoved in everyone's face. Maybe because they're the lower weight classes, albeit, but it's not exactly being shoved in everyone's faces, is it? No. Like it's not like a main fight that everybody knows, that everybody knows about, and brings more casual eyes to the fight.
I think maybe Erceg. I mean, obviously he had a fight before, but Erceg had he got his shot really quickly against Pantoja, and that was a really close fight, which Pantoja won. But he did better than people expected. Considering it was, I think, 10th ranked fight or what it was at the time. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, Asaraka's last win was really impressive against Archuleta. That's a good fighter to beat. That's the former Bellator champion. But it'll be an interesting. I'm not going to act like I know a whole lot.
It's interesting.
Pantoja tends to have close fights with people, like Riyadh. He doesn't tend to really ever blow anyone out of the water. He's incredibly consistent. And he has that sort of Petian, close fight, but wins the rounds. So there's always a chance. And Asaraka's got power to stop people. And as you say, he's a star. He'll be used to big fights. And in Japan, it's a sort of different atmosphere, but it's still a big crowds. And, Rising gets good attendances. So he'll be used to those big events. he's headlining, which is probably not a position they expected to be in. Obviously, I assume Shavkat Bilal was the expected headliner. So it's that pressure situation that he'll be used to, and that might benefit him in that sense. Obviously, Pantoja's got a hell of a story. He's someone that if the UFC probably put a bit more care into, could be a genuine star for them, because he's got an exciting fight style. He's got, it's one of those stories that you wish he didn't have to work 2 jobs while being a UFC champion, but that is what it is. But it's going to be a good fight. That's what we know. It's just, can Asakura take that from Ryzen into UFC and deliver and possibly make history or close to it in terms of modern history, and just first fight take that title? How else do you establish yourself as a star in the company? But with that,
if Asakura was to win on Saturday, it'd skyrocket to superstardom on different sides of the globe and not just in Asia. As the Risen, however you pronounce it, as the fights that he's had on there equipped him well enough for Pantoja and the jiu-jitsu, I don't know, because it all seems to be purely striking with Asakura. So it's a massive clash of styles, and it's a very, very, very interesting fight. The other fight might have big implications for number 1 contendership in the heavyweight division, Sirogan versus Volkov, number 2. How do we see that one playing out?
Gunn needs a big performance, after that really bad display against John Jones. I don't know if he's fought in between that. Apologies, but he's, he needs something big here, because that performance was bad. He did beat Spivak, but I still think that performance lingers for people, especially it does for me. Losing to John Jones in that fashion. I know Jones is very good, but he was meant to be, a real contender at the time. Volkov is, he dismantled Pavlovich, and that was an incredible performance from him. And obviously, after sort of having that same thing happen to Aspinall, it's a great way to bounce back, and he's super consistent. And I struggle to actually look past Volkov on this one. I know it went the other way when they fought last time, but I think Volkov now is, this is his, I know heavyweights can fight for a while, but I just feel like Volkov is more in form, if that makes any sense. And then I think, obviously MMA math, that goes out the window a lot of the time, but Garn needs something big here. If he can get it, he's capable of winning this fight. This is a 50-50 really, but Garn needs something big to change that perception of him, that he's not just a contender, he's someone that can actually win the championship, and obviously would set up a fresh fight probably with Aspinall. So there is that implication there for Garn in terms of giving a fresh matchup, but I think Volkov still has got it. But Volkov's lost an all, he's someone that is that sort of gatekeeper in the heavyweight division. So 50-50, Garn needs a big performance.
I agree. I want there to be a new emerging contender in the heavyweight division, because we're just getting rematches left, right, and centre now, aren't we? Yeah. We're either getting rematches left, right, and centre, or we're not getting the ultimate match that we want, which hopefully we do. And like we said, the winner of this on Saturday could very well get the winner of Jones and Aspinall. Anything else on the card on Saturday that piqued your interest? There is a good few fights on there. Bo Nickel returns. Bryce Mitchell returns.
Yeah, I don't know why that's on the main
after being brutally knocked out by Josh Emmett. But it's difficult with Bryce, because he gets good. He'll have a good win, and then he'll have a bad loss. Good win, bad loss, and that's the way it's been for his last 4 fights. I think he's beat Barbosa and Ige, and lost to Emmett and somebody else. I can't remember who else he lost.
Topuria he lost to, I think.
That was at Topuria, yeah. He was shot by Topuria, but it when you get knocked out like he did off Emmett, we said at the time on a podcast, his soul was taken that night. So it's going to be very, very, very interesting with how he comes into this fight on Saturday.
I've got no idea why it's on the main card. He's fighting Cron Gracie, who's coming off 2 losses. So it seems pretty much like I know Cron Gracie's obviously good on the ground and that, but that feels like a setup fight in terms of get yourself back in there and win it. There's some. Nate Landwehr Ho Choi will be really fun. The one fight that stands out, I don't know why it's so low, but Evloev versus Sterling is like a genuinely big fight.
That's a good fight, that.
And it's like the 7th on. So I don't particularly know why it's so low, but that's a really big fight, and that has implications in the featherweight division. That could headline a fight night.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's going to be a really tough. Maybe they feel like it's going to be very grapply, and which it probably is. But I mean, Evloev and Lopez was like that, and that delivered in terms of entertainment. So I think that will be a really interesting. I don't know how that will go because Evloev's very good, but Sterling is also, that can't look past, someone that has won championships and is still young enough and good enough.
He's entertaining. He's entertaining, Sterling. I like him.
Yeah.
He's entertaining.
He goes in as the underdog, but I mean, I don't know. That's a really interesting fight. I Brian Battle versus Randy Brown. I always find Brian Battle quite interesting because you can see him get better all the time. And
Chris Weidman's on the card as well, isn't there?
Yeah, they're doing their rescheduling that fight. Josh Van's a fun fighter there. They've got Chiesa on there, Guida, so a couple of the veterans are on there. There's Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes, which and then Luke Grimbo as well. So it's a strong card, to be fair. It's probably actually better than their last card. Obviously, it doesn't have the big main event, but in terms of the actual card, is probably better. It's a strong card to end the year off, to be fair.
Yeah, I agree. I just hope we've just run through the card there, and it's absolutely stacked. And there's several big fights that can have big implications. And we still do have a big title fight on it, and I just hope that delivers. I really hope that delivers.
Fights, if it delivers, then this could be a really, this could be a card of the year contender if those last two fights deliver. Because I'm sure some of these undercard ones, I mean, calling Sterling Evloev an undercard fight is a bit crazy, but it is. And that's gonna. I imagine a lot of these fights will deliver, and there's a lot of fun fighters on there too. So there's a lot. But I mean, we can look forward to fights. Also, next year we've got an awful lot to look forward to with Cage Warriors. They've announced their first quarter schedule. They're heading out to Rome, Manchester, London, Glasgow, Dublin. I mean, a lot to be excited for in the Cage Warriors camp at the moment.
It's huge, and it's 2 shows in Manchester as well. They'll have the Unplugged one on the Friday night and the usual one on the Saturday night. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shows by April, which is impressive. Yeah. And they're going back to Dublin, which I think they need to, because the RDS in Dublin always the roof is always blowing off there. Glasgow, the growing stars in Scotland, Sean Clancy Jr., who were touched on the Newcastle card last week. He looked fantastic. He come in on 5 days' notice, I think it was, and he fought, I can't remember his name, a Brazilian who had beat Chris Bungard, Scottish bloke Chris Bungard, recently. So Clancy Jr. sort of like got revenge for Bungard, and he announced himself as like, I am an official contender under this promotion now, because the Brazilian who we fought had like 3-4 times the amount of fights than him. I think he had like 20-something fights. I've not got it in front of me. But I think he's one that they can really, really get behind. James Power looked great as well on that Cage Warriors card. So we'll see him in a big fight on one of them cards. Adam Cullen and Tobias Aurelio, I hope that gets rearranged. Liam Gittins and Quadrian, I think that might be rearranged for Manchester or London. Both of them on the cusp of the UFC. I'm trying to think who else I'd like to see on any of them first few cards. There's a lot, and Giovanni Scott, I think he's an exciting flyweight. He's stood out. Who else has stood out for me this year? Anybody but Luke Riley. I want Luke Riley to be on that weekend, the double-header weekend. Cage Warriors on the Friday at the Indigo, and UFC on the Saturday, the fight night. I want Luke Riley to be on that card. He has to be on that card, Nathan. Who else? Who else for you has to be on that London card, mate? At the UFC one.
The thing is, I don't know. I mean, look, I know why they do it. It's a way to manage the fighters' pay and stuff like that. They don't want to pay too much. But Luke Riley should be straight in the UFC. They shouldn't need to win a fight to get there. So hopefully he's on there. I mean, what
about international fighters as well? Who would you like to see come over and be on the card as well as that lot?
I'd like to, just for the domestic, obviously Leon, Paddy, they're going to be guys you need to see, and obviously who they fight, it will be interesting. I'm trying to think, like, in terms of international guys, it depends how the Shavkat Garry fight goes. I guess that's not going to headline. Actually, I mean, Garry, you may get on there. I know that's an Irish fighter, but really, these fight cards are perfect for the UK fighters to get tested and get real good matchups and start pushing them forward. So that really, you want to see Paddy now. He needs to get tested. So, you know, I'm not entirely sure about people's schedules, but you want him to fight someone that's high in the heavyweight, in the featherweight and heavyweight rankings. I have no chance in featherweight. he might have a, you know, he might have a chance in that one. So you want him to fight. I mean, or lightweight, isn't it, with Moicano? That's the fight really there.
Yeah, unless he's out of camp, then yeah, it probably would be heavyweight, Nath. Yeah.
You get him there. You know, you've got Ian Garry. There's enough crop of UK fighters. Obviously, Vucenic, you can get in there as well and have him.
Yeah,
him
I think Lerone Murphy said he's going to be on it. I'd like the Josh Emmett fight, Murphy and Emmett. Get that on there. Get that on the main card, third from the top or something like that, or maybe Coleman. It depends because you can look at the Paddy Moicano fight, and we thought, and everybody assumed that would be the headline, but now Leon's declared that he's the headline. So will Paddy be co-main event? Because that I think Paddy and Moicano, I think that would have to be a headline. But if he's going to be on the match card, then Leon is not, is it? Which is a shame.
No, I think that's a good thing though, in the sense of that you know, you want to see a stacked card. You don't want to see just one fight and then they sort of give the rest up. So I mean, stack it as much as you want. You can make if you want to really test Paddy, have it be the 5-5 and 25 minutes. I'm sure it'll probably keep it to 15. But Leon, I actually don't know who Leon's going to fight. That's a really interesting one in terms of who that person will be, because a lot of them are tied up, either injured or, you know, you've got someone like Colby who ain't going to, you know, he's already beaten him, and so it's a weird mix. I don't actually know who he's going to fight, but it's going to be interesting nonetheless, because Leon is, you know, such a great fighter, and in London he's going to be backed, you know, by everyone. So we'll have to see. Paddy will be on there. I assume Molly will be on there as well. And you know, it could be, and you know, Kavanagh, you know, this could be a great opportunity to showcase some of these other guys, as they tend to, but you have to match them up well, as you know, you probably have to be a bit naughty with the ones you feel like are prospects and give them, you know, not layups, because no fight is, but you know, that them sort of like, right, you win this one, and it's just a way to announce themselves on, while also giving sort of the more tested prospects and contenders those tough matchups that they might, you know, they might not go into as outright favourites, but you know, they're going to have the backing of the crowd and they're going to be on home soil. So as long as they don't do that stupid thing where they start it at like 10 o'clock at night, then you know, I think it should be good, and we'll see. Maybe that could be the time that they announce Aspinall versus Jones. You know, that could be the night they do it.
Hopefully, I hope they don't do it to please the American audience, because a lot of our UK fighters, especially like Lerone and Paddy, they've all got momentum coming on, big wins. Lerone's had a good year, 5 rounds with Edson Barbosa, good win against Ige last time. I'd love for him to get that Josh Emmett fight, keep momentum going against. I think that's a really evenly matched fight. Both of them have had a really good year. Same with Paddy and Moicano. I think that's a really evenly matched fight. And then it's difficult to match make the others. We're no experts. We can just say the fights that we'd like to see on paper. But I think it's about keeping momentum going, drawing that big crowd in, and it'll also keep the broadcaster happy that they've got a stacked fight night card and it's not even a numbered card. So that will please people that they don't have to shell out for a pay-per-view as well. It'll be free on TNT and the full prelims on Fight Pass, etc., which is another good thing. And like you said, hopefully that's when we could get the Aspinall Jones announcement. But March seems a long time. March seems a long time away for an announcement.
It's Jones. You got to get Jones tax on that one. You know, we could be waiting a while. You know, it might not even be announced till July. But I mean, I was just quickly looking. I mean, maybe I think Sean Brady is like one that he probably, in terms of ranking, that makes a lot of sense. Della Maddalena, looking at that is a really fun fight against Edwards. Similar styles, and you know, it could be really technical over those 25 minutes, as well as being hard hitting, because I can't see Usman or Covington, you know, who are sort of still up there taking that fight. So maybe Usman, that would be fun, obviously in terms of name value. But Edwards beat him twice, hasn't he? So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that carries as much weight now. I don't know about the Usman Edwards. Yeah. I'm not sure.
I think Brady or Della Maddalena really is the ones you want to be looking at, because it's that for the UFC at least, it's that win-win situation of, right, Edwards wins, he's a star, or they make a new one. You know, as long as Brady doesn't win in boring fashion.
Or in a world where Shavkat blitzes Ian Garry in a round, and Ian Garry can be fit for March.
Yeah,
But probably if Leon knows that his main event, he's probably signed a contract and he knows who his opponent is.
That's it. Yeah, it's a weird time in the welterweight division, just because you sort of getting that changing of the guard slowly from guys that don't take a lot of fights in Covington, Usman, and to be fair, Edwards doesn't fight an awful lot. And now you've got people like Brady Della Maddalena. I mean, Buckley's in there, Burns, but like, that's probably a bit too soon for those guys. Well, Burns it may be, but Buckley it's too soon. Prates, Morales too soon. So there's a couple fights for Edwards there, but we'll have to just keep our eyes on it and see what they do.
Absolutely. And just to touch on in other news, Octagon in a few weeks in Prague. Shamrock is no longer on the card. I know, gutted. But Jonas Magard is. I can't remember who the announcement was that he's due to fight. So it's still a good card for them to win the year. I just hope they come back to the UK and have a couple of shows here and there, because then with Cage Warriors and Octagon, PFL coming over, we're going to be spoilt then, aren't we? This is the best time to be alive for mixed martial arts. I just hope, for your sake, that more of them end up down south a bit further than London.
None of them ever are. London is as south as it gets for MMA, unfortunately. You want to go to some of the amateur stuff going on in Cornwall. Even that's something like Swindon and Cornwall, which still isn't close for me, but is what it is. But yeah, that's a shame about Shamrock. But I mean, you're going to be there. You're going to see a lot of Will Fleury and Vermola and Paradisia versus Cater as well as Magard. It's going to be a hell of a card, and you're going to be there.
Yeah, can't wait for it. Anything else that you want to touch on before we leave it for this week?
No, I think we've covered everything really. I mean, there's still a lot to be excited for. I mean, we'll be back at some point to talk UFC and everything that went down in that card, as well as whatever else is going on across there. Obviously, we've got a Cage Warriors. I know it's an American one, so that's probably a bit out of our range in terms of that amateur, the regional scene in America. But we'll be on there to talk UFC, and obviously there's it's MMA, so something's going to happen in between now and the end of the year in regards to fights going on, whether it be in the UK or in the UFC or PFL, Bellator if they still exist. I don't know, but there's a lot to look forward to, especially this UFC card coming up.
Yeah, Bellator do still exist because they have the way they do it. I'm starting to understand the structure a bit more now. Let me just touch on this before we go. So the PFL, they'll have the European series, then they'll have the world champ. They have a world champion series, and then they'll just have like MENA. They call it MENA. So it was MENA fights in Abu Dhabi and Saudi, and then they'll just have a few fights here and there to fill up the card. And then with the Bellator promotion, that when they bought them, they still have Bellator fights. They still have Bellator champions. So the Paul Hughes and the Magomedov, that's a Bellator title fight.
Yes, yeah.
So then they'll have they'll have every so often. I don't know how the calendar and how the structure works, or when it will next be. They'll have a night of champions, so the Bellator champions will face the PFL champions. That will then create the super champion. So now I think the bloke who won the PFL heavyweight championship on Saturday, I think he's won it twice now. I think he's next for Francis Ngannou. I think that's what the PFL are saying. Like, well, who else would there be for Ngannou within there anyway? Like, this guy's won it twice, the season twice. So he's got to have his crack at it. I just think it takes a bit of getting used to the structure, especially with the Bellator thing. It's a lot in it. If you were to put it out on a wall chart, it'd take up your fucking living room, for crying out loud.
I mean, I don't think it's great for the fighters of Bellator as well. They must be frustrated because then they're not having that opportunity to fight a whole lot. I mean, I know Bellator isn't exactly. I don't know if they're exclusive guys. I know their best guys are, but there's opportunity. There's limited opportunities to fight, and I'm sure. I can't remember. I think this has happened already with, I think Musashi it was. But they're frustrated because they're not getting fights. And I mean, it's the same as the one championship stuff where they feel like they're sort of stuck and they can't really do a whole lot. So it's a weird combination. I'd like to see a few more Bellator events next year because these guys need to fight, and it's more just so for it's their livelihood. They need to get out there and they need to have fights. So hopefully, and they've still got a really talented division. And how else? What better way to build up to these super fights than by having these guys actually give you highlights and something to build for those fights. So I hope we see more Bellator fights. I know that Hughes fight's going to be really good, but there's enough talent on that Bellator roster that there's still plenty to look forward to, and hopefully they can book some more fights for them, because I can imagine it's quite frustrating if you're a Bellator fighter at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's the second week in January, the Hughes Nurmagomedov fight, and it'd be massive for Paul Hughes if he wins, because they'll just find the biggest arena that they can for him in Ireland and have a Bellator. He'll have his first Bellator title defense. Big task against the family name that we know that carries a massive reputation. But if he can, it'd be fucking huge for him, and it'd be massive for the promotion as well, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's an exciting start to next year, and as you said, we will revisit after this weekend's action and talk all things UFC 310. But for now, thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to go and check out www.hez.co.uk for all your bespoke gym equipment, and we will see you again next week.